everybody. This is Diane, one half of the Real Housewives of Alaska.
And this is Marnell, the other half of the Real Housewives of Alaska. And strap in because we're probably going to talk a lot more than 70 minutes about a show that was 70 minutes long.
I'm not convinced I'm going to be able to hold up my end of the bargain.
This is pretty heady stuff.
All right, so we are talking today about Saving Capitalism, which is a documentary that was put out on Netflix in 2017. It's based on the book that was published in 2015 by Robert Reich. I think I'm saying his name properly.
I think so too.
Tell me how you rated it.
So I rated it 4.2. I probably would have rated it higher, except I actually liked his other documentary from 2013, Inequality for All, a lot better, which I also wound up watching today.
So
again,
Inequality for All, right?
Inequity for All.
Is it? Is it Inequity?
Pretty sure.
Now I'm not sure. Now I'm looking.
I didn't think it was going to stand up. So that's why I was like, let's do the one from 2017. Because, of course, 2017 was after the beginning of Trump's presidency. So I was like, Inequity for All isn't going to stand up. And no, it totally did.
It's Inequality for All.
It is Inequality for All.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I actually found myself kind of wishing I'd watched that first because I haven't seen it. So
it's really good. It's a lot. It has like a lot more kind of like animation and graphs and stuff to go along with what Robert is talking about. And so it's a little more engaging than just all of the kind of talking that goes on in Saving Capitalism.
So for people who struggle with economic stuff like me, that probably would have been a better format.
And if you have the attention span of myself or an elder millennial or Gen Z, he is on TikTok.
Of course he's on TikTok.
Of course he's on TikTok.
Well, I watch his Facebook videos from time to time, but those are longer than a TikTok video. Although not as long as a movie.
But he also, we'll get into it, but he does a ton on YouTube also. So you can find his works just about anywhere.
So I found out when I was looking at him for Housewives Hero that he actually does a weekly show on YouTube called The Common Good. Mm-hmm. Which I did not know.
I did not know that either until we were doing this too. And he does a lot of his work with the person who co-directed, I think, Jacob Kornbluth.
So Jacob Kornbluth is the primary director, and then I'm assuming it's Sari, S-A-R-I, Gilman is the co-director.
Right.
Well, I rated it 3.75 diminutive labor secretaries out of 5. Because I really wanted to like it a lot more than I did, and I feel guilty that I didn't, and I think it's more about me than it actually is about the film.
Yeah, like I said, I enjoyed Inequality for All because it was more engaging. I kind of felt like Saving Capitalism was a lot more just dry content, right up until the end, basically.
Okay, so you're going to laugh at me because I actually have the book, but I haven't read the book.
That's funny. What made you download the book? Or what made you buy the book?
I bought it right after it was released in 2015, and then you know that my life was kind of a hot mess in 2015. Not that it's ever become less of a hot mess, but for people who are new to us and new to the podcast, in that year alone, my house burned down and I sustained a moderately severe head injury. So Yeah, 2015 was almost as good as 2020. Anyway, so I blame not having read the book on that. So
I think as excuses go, that's
those are pretty good excuses. Okay.
Yeah.
So there really was not a lot out there about this movie in terms of numbers, in terms of writer, director. I mean, obviously the writer was Robert Reich for lack of any other writer because he wrote the book. It was nominated for an Emmy in 2018 in the category of Outstanding Business and Economic Documentary. And I thought, boy, that's a pretty narrow category.
I was going to say it's a pretty specific category.
There probably were not many competitors, but it was a nominee, not a winner. So there we are. Jacob Kornbluth, just a little bit about him, one of our directors. So he actually has 5 director credits. He directed a movie called Love and Taxes, which apparently is semi-autobiographical. He, as you mentioned, did Inequality for All with Robert Reich. And then he's got 2 fictional movies to his credit. One called The Best Thief in the World with Mary Louise Parker. And one called Haiku Tunnel. And it actually looks like he's the main character in Haiku Tunnel, although it is a fictional comedy. And then Sari Gilman, the co-director, has one other director credit, a show called King's Point, which is a documentary about 5 seniors living in a retirement resort in Florida. And it just felt a little too close to home. Lots of divorce, tragedy, and searching for the meaning of their lives. So I was like, no, thank you. And then she also was an editor on a movie called The Ghost of Abu Ghraib, which was on HBO. And I remember watching that and really liking it. For the subject matter, it was a really fantastic documentary.
So Jacob Kornbluth has a TV series coming out. It doesn't look like has any episodes yet, called Talk Boring to Me with with W. Kamau Bell.
W. Kamau Bell. Yeah.
Bell. Yep. As the narrator.
Oh, okay.
Examining a myriad of issues in the U.S., including the U.S. Census, food insecurity, and public education, and it offers a way for viewers to get involved in affecting change.
Well, that sounds really good.
Right? It doesn't sound boring at all.
Right?
So be on the lookout for Talk Boring to Me. But in the meantime, Kornbluth and Reich, they have a media company called Inequality Media, a not-for-profit media company. Their videos feature Reich discussing topics relating to inequality and power, primarily in the U.S., including universal basic income, the racial wealth gap, affordable housing, and gerrymandering. So they do 2 to 30-minute videos on those on Robert's YouTube channel.
I looked to see if he had any kind of charity that he was associated with, Robert Reich. And actually, you can support Inequality Media. And their point is to try to get more of those kinds of videos out to educate the average American. So that was the only thing I found for a charity for him. I'm skipping ahead, but there we are.
That's fine. You can go to robertreich.org. And the man is a social media giant. He's only 4'10.5", and he has a huge presence on the internet. He's on YouTube. He's on TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. He's got his own webpage that he keeps very, very up to date. He's on LinkedIn. He's got a Tumblr. Good God, who still has Tumblr? I'm sure he probably had a MySpace at one point, but the man has all the social medias that you can think of, and he's written 19 books. He's done I think there's 3.
18 books, I think.
Oh, I thought I counted 19.
18, including the new one, which is called The System, Who Rigged It and How to Fix It.
He never takes a day off. That's what I'm saying, is like, I'm pretty sure he's got a new documentary that's in the works about the death tax. Death and Taxes, a documentary film. So I'm pretty sure he just has a camera that follows him around 24/7 for all of these documentaries, because they seem to be spaced out every couple of years and they span a couple of years. So, I mean, the guy is just always working.
I'm looking up the Death and Taxes because that sounds really good. Where did you see that?
So it's on IMDb.
Okay.
Look at the American society through the lens of a bitter debate over the estate tax, a tax that few pay, but many feel is unfair and un-American. Which I'm super interested in, because someone that's never going to have to deal with the wealth tax or the inheritance tax, estate tax. I kind of really am like, yeah, whatever, but also I'm like, it is kind of maybe double taxing people a little bit. I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I feel like I don't know a single blessed person who's going to be impacted by that, so I'm feeling pretty indifferent to it. I'll probably watch the documentary, but yeah, I'm feeling pretty indifferent.
There is a great article that I will post on my Facebook, but it is posted. It's in the New York Times, so I think you only get a few reads before they go behind a paywall. So basically, just open it in a different type of browser, or like private browsing to get around that. Or you can do what I finally did and subscribe to the New York Times online, so that I contribute to their very, very good articles. But this article is called "The Rich Kids Who Want to Tear Down Capitalism. Socialist-minded millennial heirs are trying to live their values by getting rid of their money." So the largest transition of inherited wealth is about to take place in the next decade. And the money is going to go mostly from boomers to millennials. And it is trillions of dollars. And more millennials are kind of disgusted with this kind of plutocracy that happens and all of this inherited wealth. And they feel that they have benefited from it enough. Some of them say that they'll set aside enough money to live comfortably for the rest of their life, but the vast majority of their wealth will be given away. And there's actually a couple of foundations that have been set up to help these people give away their money that will affect better social change.
That is really interesting.
It super is.
If you would tag me in that, I will share it to the Facebook page for The Real Housewives.
Okay.
I guess that pretty soundly takes us into Housewives hero, who is obviously Robert Reich.
Right.
So he was born to a Jewish family in Scranton, Pennsylvania in 1946. So that makes him a year older than our mother. People who have watched his documentaries or who have seen his stuff on social media probably realize that he is very short in stature, and he actually has, and I'm the healthcare professional, and I'm probably going to say this wrong, multiple epiphyseal, yeah, I'm going to blow that word.
Epiphyseal?
So basically what it is it's the area of your bones that fuse once you're done growing.
There's a reason why it's known as Fairbanks syndrome.
Right.
Not its actual name.
Yeah, and I should totally know how to pronounce it, and I'm embarrassed that I don't, but I don't see very many peds, for one thing, and and for another, it's been about 30 years since I took an anatomy and physiology class. Anyway, yes, it's also called Fairbanks disease, and people who have it typically have a very small stature, a short stature. They sometimes have accompanying chronic joint pain, scoliosis, and early onset osteoarthritis.
That's too bad. Because here I thought he was just, like it was just going to be sort of a achondroplasia type thing. But of course, even that comes with its own other symptoms.
Achondroplasia is much worse. I mean, I think we talked a fair amount about that when we did Far From the Tree, and achondroplasia is much worse.
I see. And I just thought he was short, and to find out that he actually has, some sort of other symptoms to go along with it, that's disappointing, because I'm like, he's not that short. He's an inch and a half shorter than me.
Well, it doesn't sound like everyone ends up with horrible chronic pain or with early arthritis, but it sounds like it's fairly typical. It sounds like it's pretty
dealing with it. He seems to be dealing with it very well, because like I said, the guy never takes a day off.
Well, people who deal with chronic pain, many of them hide it really, really well.
Yeah. High achiever.
So, speaking of high achiever, he went to Dartmouth University for his undergraduate degree. He actually met and had a date with Hillary Rodham Clinton there. So that's how he met Hillary Clinton.
And he actually introduced Hillary and Bill.
He did mention that in the documentary. He was a Rhodes Scholar, and that's actually where he met Bill Clinton. Mm-hmm. And then he earned his JD from Yale Law School. So he's a highly educated man. He has had professorships at Brandeis University, at JFK's School of Government, which is at Harvard University, and he currently, since 2006, is a professor of public policy at the Goldman School of Public Policy at UC Berkeley. So he is an incredibly well-educated man who is passing that on. And he talked at the end of the documentary about how important and invigorating it was for him to be surrounded by young people who really have a goal to make the world better than what we're looking at right now.
Yes, and I think that's part of his engagement on social media, is that he really, really wants to get the next generation involved in politics. And in the movie, he even points out that, some of you will be leaders. Mm-hmm. And he really, really wants to help people steer young people in a more hopeful direction.
We're going to talk about that because I'm not sure how we get there. I was surprised that his involvement in politics went back so early. So he actually was an intern to Robert Kennedy Jr. back in 1967. He served in the Ford and Carter administrations. He was, of course, the labor secretary for Bill Clinton from 1993 to 1997. And he was actually a member of Barack Obama's Economic Transition Advisory Board when the transition from Bush to Obama was happening.
Yeah, he said he didn't even know what the title of his job. He's like, I don't even know what that is. Did you mention he also worked for the Carter administration?
Yeah, he worked for both the Ford and the Carter administrations.
Yeah.
So I was surprised, and I didn't realize this. He endorsed Bernie Sanders both in 2016 and in 2020.
God, that really does not shock me, though.
It shouldn't shock me. I just felt like he was a little more mainstream than that.
I think he used to be. One of the last things he said in in the show, and he had this look on his face, like, you could see the 50 years of service in politics. He said, "This is the most historic period I have lived through." And so he's been through a lot. And watching Inequality for All, he talks about some of the struggles that he had during the Clinton administration, and basically not being able to steer things in the direction he felt that they should go. And because, of course, Clinton was the one who did away with the Glass-Steagall Act, and Robert Reich left that administration, like, basically just kind of, he kind of gave up for a little while. So I really think, like, and he even said, I can't remember if it was in this one or Inequality for All, that he hasn't moved. Everything else has moved to the right. So he's like, I was like a middle of the road, like, conservative back in the day, and now I'm radical left.
We'll talk a little bit about that, too. I don't want to paint him as a giant hero, because I think, like all of us, he has flaws. I mean, it's much easier to pick out, I don't know. I guess it's easier to pick out a hero who is maybe someone whose flaws aren't fully on display, and we've got 50 years of public service to look at for this gentleman. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, when I read about him, he was called out on opposing low-income housing in his Berkeley neighborhood.
Oh.
Apparently, there was some heartburn about this old building getting replaced with like 120 low-income apartments. And W. Kamau Bell, who you mentioned earlier, interviewed him about a month after he was called out for it, and he still was basically heartachy about it. And apparently the building instead got replaced by condos that were going for like $1 million a piece. So
that's disappointing.
Yeah, it was very disappointing.
You couldn't even come to a middle ground of, like, maybe not low income, but not millionaires, Like, maybe how about working middle class families? Although low income housing needs to go somewhere.
Well, and here's the deal. I mean, I don't think there's such thing as low income housing in a place like Berkeley.
True.
But I don't know. Never been to Berkeley. Probably won't.
I'll have to see if I can find out what his argument was. Because for me, like, it could have been something that I think about whenever I see large condo constructions going into usually a residentially zoned, single family dwelling area. I'm always like, okay, our septic sewer system was not built to handle that. Like, our water system wasn't, like, our roads were not built to handle that influx of people in the morning and evening drives. Like, just the sheer infrastructure of putting in mass housing into an area that it wasn't originally built for is that's kind of the city planning policy nerd in me. But I'm sure it wasn't completely to do with that, and it did probably have something to do with lowering the property values in Berkeley.
I don't know. I mean, all of us have feet of clay.
Yep.
I do want to say, on the plus side, he supports universal basic income. He supports the fight for $15 minimum wage. I mean, I think that there are a lot more things that are awesome about Robert Reich than a one-time, not in my backyard thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to say about him?
I don't think that I do. Did he go over kind of what started him down his path in this, or was it Inequality for All?
It must have been in Inequality for All, so please go ahead.
So, of course, being someone of short stature, growing up, he was bullied a lot. And he had a friend that would protect him from the bullies named Michael Schwimmer. Schwemner. And Michael Schwemner was one of the victims of murder, Cheney, Goodman, and Schwemner, by the Ku Klux Klan in 1964 for registration of African American voters. Reich cites this event as his inspiration to fight bullies, to protect the powerless, to make sure that people without a voice have a voice. So I just thought that was really interesting, that something that's sort of such a historic moment affected him in such a personal way and sent him down the path that leads us here.
Again, way more that to be thankful for in Robert Reich than to be frustrated by one moment of, I really don't want that in my neighborhood.
Right. So I just thought that was interesting, and like I said, I watched both of them today. I watched Saving Capitalism, and then I went back and rewatched Inequality for All, because I was like, does it stand up? Like, I feel like I liked it better, and I did, and then I rewatched Saving Capitalism. So the two were kind of blended together, so that's probably why I took a ton of notes the second watch through.
I really do want to watch Inequality for All. It's probably not going to happen this week just because I have a big work week ahead of me, but
I will tell you this, that it is on Amazon Prime. You can rent it for $3.99, or you can go to YouTube and watch it for free.
Which, by the way, speaking of watching things, my Hulu account is all jacked up. I know that's totally a first world, like, middle class chick problem, but ugh.
It's always something.
It's always something. All right. Well, I don't have a lot for Housewives Weekly, but I've got a little bit. So I thought it was really important to look at where we're at economically in December of 2020. So I just did a quick search, and there are 2 unemployment programs that are set to expire the day after Christmas if Congress does not extend them.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't extend them, more than 9 million additional people will lose jobless benefits the day after Christmas. We're still not at a place where we've done any kind of additional COVID relief. Job growth decreased sharply in November, and of course the pandemic is resurging, so we're looking at probably having to do more shutdowns, which means worse things for small businesses and restaurants.
And people are planning for this. So in a month, when you see that retailers had a terrible holiday season, and businesses are having to cut jobs and file bankruptcy and close their doors and things like that, just remember that it was because this is, I think this month is like a quarter of all of their sales for the year. They rely so much on the holiday season, and people who are people who are barely scraping by now with the meager assistance that they do get because of the COVID pandemic, are set to lose it the day after Christmas. So they aren't thinking about buying new flat screens or, the whatever the latest craze for toys is.
Well, and really, honestly, the people that they interviewed on the article that I read, even with the small unemployment benefits that they're getting, are behind in their rent. They're having to make a decision which bill to pay and which bill to ignore. So people are already suffering. People can't plan for things to be worse. Things for most people already are worse.
Yeah.
Sadly, there was a survey that was done by the Census Bureau just in the last month, and 1 in 6 renters is behind in their rent. 12% of adults say that their families didn't have enough to eat at some point in the last week. And that's up from like 3.7% the last time one of these surveys was done.
God.
Yeah. So...
And that those renters who can't afford to pay their rent usually means a landlord who can't afford to pay their mortgage. So, I mean, that all rolls up.
Well, and the incredibly sad thing is, number one, we could have managed this. I mean, as a country, if we had not politicized wearing masks and social distancing, we could have managed this. Number two, it's just going to get worse because people traveled over Thanksgiving and people are already people are already not canceling their travel plans for Christmas. Right. So, I don't see Americans making better decisions.
No. And I think we've said it every week consecutively on this podcast, say that every single day in America, it is a record for COVID cases. And the reason why you hear that is because every day is more than yesterday. Yesterday, Alaska had over 900 cases.
Yes.
And that was a record for us.
Us is a huge number. And the country has added 1 million COVID diagnoses in the first 5 days of December.
Oh.
Which is... huge growth. So, and the reason that I'm ranting about the pandemic and ranting about not having things under control is that it's only going to make people's economic circumstances worse. Mm-hmm. And the people who are counting on, we've got vaccines, everything's going to be great, aren't counting on the fact that we don't have a lot of doses of these vaccines to start with. Mm-mm. And it's going to take about 70% of our country getting vaccinated for us to have adequate immunity to protect people. So a lot of anti-vaxxers are going to have to get on board.
Well, and I don't know if I know that there's more than one shot, more than one company is making the shot, but all of them are 2-dose vaccines, correct? So
the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines are 2-dose. So, for example, I believe there's like 50 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine available currently, or, available once it gets emergency use authorization, which means basically 25 million people will get vaccinated.
Right. And how long in between those doses
do you go? I don't know. I don't know what the guidelines are. And then there is a vaccine being produced by AstraZeneca, different technology, not mRNA technology. It's older technology, and it's about 70% effective with one vaccination, but if you have a 2-dose series, it knocks it up into the 90th percentile. So it also looks like it's going to be one of those where you're going to want to have 2 versus 1.
Right.
The plus side is that because it's different technology, it doesn't have to be stored and transported at crazy low temperatures. Mm-hmm. one of the things that I've read, and I've only read it in one place, but it was in Forbes, so it's not like it was, in the National Enquirer. The technology that it is generated with has the potential to cause people who get that vaccination to be more likely to get an HIV infection if they're in a high-risk group. I don't exactly know how that technology works. I was a little hesitant to share it. I shared it on my Facebook page a couple of weeks ago. I have since had a couple of people get really angry and say, well, then I'm just not getting vaccinated, period. And I'm like, all right, stop first. It's completely different from the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines, which are the vaccines that are getting emergency use authorization hearings like up and coming here in the next week.
Mm-hmm.
So
don't throw
the baby out with the bathwater. Do your research,
right.
Really
be educated about what goes into your body.
Right.
And not just like somebody told me educated, like actual science educated.
Right. And I was super reluctant to even share that article, but I feel like that we also need to have open discussion, full disclosure, because people need to be really well informed. And I don't want someone to come back and, a year from now or 5 years from now and say, well, you hid X, Y, or Z from me.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway,
I was actually just listening to what it means to be the mRNA vaccines today, and I thought that was really interesting because it's not the dead virus. It's not like the flu shot where they're injecting you with the dead virus that your body goes and creates antibodies for it. It's something else. But I thought that was interesting that our vaccines are evolving,
it's
to
totally brand new technology.
Yeah. So absolutely do your research on the type of vaccination you are looking to get.
And in fairness, it's also going to a certain degree, be what is available. When yep. you have the turn to be vaccinated. I mean, there definitely is going to be a tiered system of vaccination. But anyway, sorry. So I got us sidetracked on vaccinations. And the reason that I got us sidetracked is people, just because there's a vaccine on the horizon or a couple of vaccines on the horizon doesn't mean we can give up masks. It doesn't mean we can give up social distancing. It doesn't mean we can give up being uber cautious.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's going to take a long time for us to get enough people vaccinated for this pandemic to be controlled.
It is.
So it means not traveling. It means having a small bubble. I mean, I wrote a blog this week about how I'm a bubble of one, and it really sucks. It's really miserable to be a bubble of one. It's very lonely. But it's too risky.
And we are getting way off track, but I do have to mention the struggle of being a bubble of one. I was watching TikTok the other night, and someone came up and said that, it was basically about breaking down the barrier of men seeking treatment for mental illness. And he's like, during COVID, we're all depressed. He's like, even my therapist had a bad day. He's like, for the first time that I've been going to therapy, I felt like my therapist needed me there more than I needed her there. And she was saying how for the first time in her career, she is having to turn away patients. And, the people's stories are more and more desperate. And these are the people that can afford to seek therapy. And, I heard the exact same story from my therapist. My therapist actually, she's one of the only ones that takes, that bills the military insurance. Mm-hmm. And so she has a lot of veterans, of active military and veterans in her practice. And she's had to stop taking referrals. She's like, I work 12 hours a day. She's like, I usually don't even take a lunch hour. I've taken on extra hours. And she's like, and I've barely left time for myself, and this just keeps going. And so, it's really, really tough out there for everyone, both mentally and financially. So I really, really hope that Congress does something soon.
I do too.
Like you said, we could have had a handle on this. Most other countries, most other westernized, wealthy countries like us got a handle on this, They had everyone wear masks. They shut stuff down. They gave people minimum incomes. I was just watching something on New Zealand, how the way that they handled it, and they're just about back to normal. It's crazy.
It's going to be a long time before we're back to normal. Whatever normal is going to look like, it's going to be different. Whatever normal is going to look like.
Yeah.
All right, I've got something totally unrelated to Robert Reich, totally unrelated to the pandemic. So the Satanic Temple is in the news again. The Satanic Temple, Colorado, puts a devilish spin on the holidays. This is from Westworld, which is an independent newspaper in Denver. So apparently TST Colorado took a robotic Jesus.
No.
And they turned it into a thing called duality. And basically, what was the thing in Big with Tom Hanks? Zoltan?
Yes.
Okay.
Zoltan, I think, yeah.
So it's the same kind of deal. So basically, you stuff a dollar bill into a slot, and duality will either give you a Bible verse. And the quote is an actual shitty Bible verse, one of the really awful ones in favor of subjugating women or beating your slaves, or he'll just cut loose blaspheming.
Oh my goodness.
So if you're in Colorado, if you're in Denver, please go stuff a dollar bill into the slot of duality for me.
Okay, TST, you need to set up a virtual one of these, and I will PayPal you $1 like every day. That's how I will start my morning.
And I'm sorry, apparently it's said a robotic Jesus is not that's how they introed the article, but actually it sounds like duality was cannibalized from an animatronic Elvis. So it's not an animatronic Jesus, it's an animatronic Elvis.
Well, I mean, Elvis was sort of a deity in his time. Still kind of is, to some.
Oh, so this is weird. So maybe it is a little Jesus-y. So the person who created it, his name is Harry Hoofklappen, which I think is very funny. I hacked the computer in it and rewired everything so that when you put a dollar bill into it, there's a dollar bill acceptor from a vending machine in Jesus' spear wound. He'll speak. He'll either deliver a Bible verse or he'll just cut loose blaspheming. Okay. So I'm sorry. I needed that moment. Of complete
levity.
irreverence because that was funny.
That is funny. And I'm serious. Like, if you guys make a virtual one and like put it up on your website, I will totally PayPal you, Venmo, whatever, Cash App. I will download the app and give you $1 every morning.
All right. So, Housewives housekeeping. I just wanted to say that I finished Schitt's Creek. It was so good. You totally have to watch it, Marnell. And
I am like 5 or 6 episodes in.
Oh, good. And when you finish it, you make sure that you watch the farewell, the thank you video that they did at the end. It comes up like right as the next thing to view once you finish the series because it made me bawl.
Oh.
It was really good. And I highly recommend following Dan Levy on Twitter. He doesn't tweet a lot, but I highly recommend following him.
The mom,
Catherine O'Hara.
Yeah, so she was just in the headlines for a TikTok video that she did. Of course, I have to follow the TikTok in news. She was the mother in Home Alone, and so she did a split screen.
I saw this. Yes.
Yeah, of reenacting her character realizing that they had left Kevin home. So that went viral the other day. So it kind of, I was thinking about that like when I was struggling through my like second or third episode of Schitt's Creek, because like you said, it really didn't start catching me until like the fourth or the fifth episode.
But now you can't stop.
No, I can't. I haven't, like, it's been slow going, just because there is actually, even though we have no Walking Dead properties to watch anymore for a while, there's still quite a bit on. There's The Mandalorian, there's Big Sky. Gosh, I don't know. I just feel like I'm watching a ton of other stuff. And then I'm like watching 6 hours of documentaries for a podcast.
You only had to watch an hour and 13 minutes. You chose to watch all the rest.
Oh, so I can encourage everyone else to go watch Inequality for All,
right,
as well as Saving Capitalism.
And Schitt's Creek.
And Schitt's Creek.
I don't really have anything else for housekeeping. Sleeping a lot makes Jill a very dull girl.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really been doing much either. The only time I really leave the house is for prescriptions, alcohol, and doctor's appointments.
Oh, I did want to tell everybody, though, Marnell's birthday is 6 days from today. Happy birthday on the podcast. I told her that she has a small package coming from me here, but a larger package coming from the Satanic Temple. So
that's fun. Whoever thought at 41 years old I would be like, I can't wait to get my package from the Satanic Temple.
I'm just sure that somewhere along the way, somebody's going to see that I have a certificate of membership, and they're going to be I can't wait for it to boil into some kind of problem for me.
It shouldn't. It should boil into a larger conversation
about religious liberty and freedom. But we'll see. The world is a crazy place, and people are very paranoid.
Yes, they are.
I always feel like I have to say, spoiler alert, they're not Satanists. It's
right.
not what
they
you think it
worship
is.
Satan.
All right. Well, so let's talk about our summer, winter, and road construction.
All righty. Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Sure. Mine are all fairly small, so we probably won't spend a lot of time talking about them.
No, I have a feeling bycatch is going to be huge.
Probably for you. So my summer, my good, was toward the end, and it's the facial expression and the compassion that he demonstrates when he is at the Fight for 15 rally, when they're doing the rally for $15 minimum wage. It was really moving to me. It actually made me tear up to watch him at that rally.
Yeah.
So that's my very small good. And it's not that there weren't other good things in this documentary. That was just a moment that really spoke to me.
And I mentioned it earlier, the look on his face when he was in the group of young people talking about, basically how to get to a better future, and there'll be future leaders, and just how he talked about, he's been 50 years in this, and this is the most historic time that he's lived through, and he's lived through so much. So he genuinely does care.
I agree with you. I think that's very true.
He sells books, he gets speaking fees, all that kind of stuff, but he genuinely cares. He puts so much out there for free that, and he goes to the rallies and the marches and things like that. He wants, to make people's lives better. So, yeah. So my summer we kind of ended on hope. There was a lot in the documentary that made me angry and made me sad. And, but we ended on hope, and, it took us all the way back to the 1880s and the 1890s, where we kind of had a similar, wealth gap, that all of the top tier had all of the wealth in the country, and we had a similar type of political corruption that kept that wealth in the top less than 1%. And he said that anger was channeled into a positive direction. People began to organize, and we started to see stuff like the antitrust legislation and that broke up the monopolies, and Teddy Roosevelt signed the law that banned corporate donations to political campaigns. He said, "We don't succumb to fascism or communism. We're more pragmatic than that." And I just thought that was a really good place to kind of leave it, because of everything that's going on right now, where, we've been so worried about fascism for the past 4 years that, we've kind of broken out of that. And, the article that, from the New York Times that I'm going to post on Facebook, about how millennials a lot of them are planning on giving away their wealth. And even Warren Buffett is going to when he dies, 99% of his approximately $72 billion is going to charity. So in the next decade, we are going to see this huge transition. I kind of feel like we are on the precipice of a major shift in politics and economics and standards of living and things like that. I think we're kind of evolving more to a better place. And in Equity for All, he talks about basically this boom time for the middle class that happened after the Great Recession, and all of the things that brought that about. And I feel like the pendulum is swinging back that way. But there's also going to be huge differences in that we have I would hope to say a lot less racism and a lot less sexism than we did in the 40s through the 70s. And
I'm not sure I believe that.
And we also have social media. So how is that going to affect it? I think it's going to affect it positively, but I don't have a crystal ball. So, we see a lot of really big social media companies doing a lot of really nefarious things. So, there's that factor. But I really was glad that we ended on hope in the show and the movie. So that was my summer. That was my good.
Well, my winter, my bad was that there were times I felt like he was just too nice.
Me too.
I mean, really, honestly, there were times that I thought that he could have pushed back a lot harder. And I was thinking about specifically when he was meeting with that group of people who were lobbyists and entrepreneurs, because they were kind of nauseating, and I wanted him to be more harsh with them.
Yeah.
And he actually says to those young people at the end of the movie that you're talking about, there are, I thought I was pushing as hard as I could, but there are times
Mm-hmm.
now that I realize I should have pushed harder. I'm not sure how that squares with his hope that we are all going to come together and fight inequality as a people. I mean, really the feeling that I got from him was that he wants to see both sides, for lack of a better description, come together and fight the people at the top. I'm not sure how that's going to work.
And I mean, part of me likes to say that, I'm glad to see somebody who is sort of on our side of the aisle extending a hand, reaching across the aisle. But on the other hand, I absolutely agree that he lets people off far too easy. And you see the same thing in Inequality for All. Some of the people that he interviews and sits down with, and he just, he doesn't push back hard enough a lot of times.
But then the flip side is, and this is bycatch stuff, and we can talk about this more when we get to bycatch, but how do we get to that place where people from both sides of the aisle fight against the people who are truly holding us down, which are big corporate interests, which are the very small number of people who hold a lot of power?
Yeah.
Anyway, there were definitely times that I thought he was far too nice. That was my bad.
Agreed. Very much agreed. So my winter was one of the facts that I learned of watching the movie. And it was the study that was done that it was from 1982 to 2002, and it was what sort of influence corporations and individual voters had on policy issues on either side of the aisle, Republican or Democrat. So if a large corporation or interest group wanted a law passed, regardless of politics, there is a 60% chance that it got passed. If they did not want the law passed, it did not pass. Issues that almost no one supported, meaning individual voters, had a 30% chance of passing. Issues that almost everyone supports
had
also
a 30%
had a 30% chance passing.
Yes.
I mean, you could flip a coin and have better chances than that. Like, whether almost nobody supports it or whether everyone supports it, you get the same outcome. And, it's...
What did he
money
say?
In politics.
He basically said that statistically, everyday voters have a non-significant impact on public policy.
Yep.
Yeah, that was shocking.
And that just breaks my heart. I mean, we obviously see that your vote matters. Your vote mattered absolutely in this last election. Your vote is going to matter when Georgia sorts their stuff out in January. But
which, by the way, I want to really encourage people to donate, and you know what our politics are if you've made it this far. Support Raphael Warnock. Support John Ossoff. Please donate, please donate, please donate. I listened to the debate between Reverend Warnock and Kelly Loeffler tonight, and it was horrible. She was so insulting and so demeaning. She's a horrible human being. Ugh.
So I saw you kind of live tweeted a little bit of it, and I actually didn't even know there was a debate going on because the debate between the other two, the last one
was basically just John Ossoff talking by himself because David Perdue refused to debate him.
Yeah, and some of the stuff that that was said was just, it was shocking to hear that out of a prospective politician's mouth, but it was absolutely necessary, you know. Um, so
So I'm
yeah,
sorry, I totally
no, no,
derailed
no.
us, but yeah, it's
Obviously
shocking that
voting,
we have so I mean, voting is so important, but it's so shocking that we have so little influence on major policy decisions.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, your vote counts, and your political donation is needed because the corporations can just about buy anyone that they want, anytime that they want. And we need to elect people who want to change that. We want to elect people that don't want money in politics. Corporations aren't people. They shouldn't get a say in things, you know. Which is, you know, it's funny. This kind of goes off. Uh, Again, I found myself thinking when I was watching this that Robert Reich talks about regulation a lot. You know, he's not against capitalism. He's against unfettered capitalism. He's, you know, one of the things we say on the show a lot is we're not really against XYZ. We're against fundamentalism. You know, any too far in any direction is usually a bad thing. And so this is why, like, I'm like, I can get along with most people on the other side of the aisle from me. Like, I would be considered a Democrat. That's usually what party I wind up voting for. But I get Republicans. Libertarians are the ones that I don't get.
I'm only laughing because I know a lot of people who claim to be libertarians, and I'm like, yeah, so really, you feel like human nature is gonna be okay and we're gonna take care of each other? No.
Yep.
No, sorry.
Nope, that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
Not in the
no,
real world.
I know someone who considers herself to be an anarchist, and I know a bunch of people who consider themselves to be libertarians, and they all think that, yeah, human nature is just that, you know, we're going to totally donate and take care of each other. No, doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And big corporations are totally not going to come in and pollute your waters and overfish your oceans and things like that. Like, it'll be fine.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was my bad. Is I was really disheartened to learn that statistic about, you know, we hold very little sway over the policies that are enacted. So what was your road construction, and was it good or bad?
I have so much more to talk about. I guess I do have more to talk about. So my road construction was kind of bad, and it was about me. And it was just basically that I felt like I needed to be smarter. I felt like I needed to be more educated. I felt like I needed a better understanding of our economy, or maybe fewer biases, to really appreciate this film more fully. I feel like I don't have a good enough grounding in understanding economics to really totally appreciate this. So maybe I do need to read that copy of Saving Capitalism that I've got on my Kindle.
So I would definitely recommend going back and watching Inequality for All. Again, free on YouTube. And I would also encourage, like, I've been following Robert Reich on TikTok since I noticed that he has a TikTok. And we joke about my TikTok addiction, but, like, I do actually follow, like, you know, Barack Obama has a TikTok. Neil deGrasse
Sorry,
Tyson
and
has
my
a
TikTok is going to be really loud for a second because I'm following Robert Reich, like, right now. I followed Bill Nye, by the way.
Yes, Bill Nye is on TikTok.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I also went and followed Robert Reich's YouTube channel today, in hopes that, like, maybe he will make me a little smarter about economic policy and things like that. So, yeah. I also did not feel smart enough to actually be talking about this, but I usually don't feel confident in like a lot of the stuff that we talk about being a middle-class white woman.
Somebody's got to talk.
Yep. The conversation has to start somewhere.
Yep.
So my road construction was kind of a good road construction, and it kind of follows my summer. The the scenes that you see that are rolling with the credits is Robert Reich dancing, which he actually does a lot of, by the way. He does it on TikTok.
So I totally, when I was watching him dance, I thought, that could totally be a TikTok video.
Yep. And so he said, if you are going to be a citizen activist, there are three things. You've got to be tenacious and patient. Social change does not happen quickly. 2, and I think this is probably the most difficult one, talk to people that disagree with you. Get out of your bubble. Maybe they will convince you that you are wrong, or you will convince them that they are wrong. Yeah, right. But you've got to talk to them. And 3, have some fun. And I also wrote that he is a much better dancer than I am. I mean,
right, me too.
The guy's got some rhythm. So that was my road construction, and it was good.
Very cool. So I have to tell you that when I went to look for this movie last night to start watching it, I was looking for Surviving Capitalism, which I thought tells you everything you need to know about my perspective.
Right? That's funny.
And there actually is a book out there called Surviving Capitalism, but I
thought it sounded familiar.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, you kind of always know it in the back of your mind, but to actually hear the numbers is really disheartening. There is over $100 billion in corporate welfare every year. We're subsidizing oil companies. We are subsidizing Walmart. We are subsidizing, billion-dollar companies.
Okay, and I have to say, because I'm so angry about that, I actually just donated to a GoFundMe for a friend in a private group on Facebook because she and her son just got an eviction notice.
Oh.
In December, in the middle of a pandemic, because it was a choice between repairing her car a few months ago and staying current on her rent.
Oh.
But how much did you say we're putting out every year in corporate welfare?
$100 billion.
Uh-huh.
So Big Oil receives $4 billion in tax subsidies, and they make $50 billion a year. Tell me again why they need those $4 billion.
Right. And all you have to do, and Robert Reich has tweeted a number of tweets that show this over the last several weeks. All you have to do is look at the amount of profits that places like Amazon, guilty, have gleaned, have gotten from all of us over the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And all you have to do is look at the bonuses that their CEOs have gotten during the pandemic. It's disgusting.
It is.
I really related to the black guy in one of the very early groups that he met with who said, how do you reform something that's immoral at its core? And I understand Robert Reich's argument that capitalism is neither moral nor immoral. I understand what he's trying to say. I don't know that I agree.
Yeah, because I think the point that the guy was trying to make was that, and he even said it in some certain words, that the laws and the rules and the policies were not written for you and me. They weren't meant for everyone to get ahead.
And I understand the argument that Robert Reich makes back, which is, there are basic rules that have to be in place for any system, and those rules change to benefit the wealthy as the system evolves, because those are the people who have the money and the power.
Yep.
I mean, I understand what Robert Reich's argument back is. I just still think that there is something immoral at the core of the system that we're dealing with.
So there's actually a couple of really good visuals in Inequality for All. He has one that's a cycle of prosperity or whatever, and it's the living wage goes up, workers are paid more, so they buy more, so companies hire more people, and more income tax is generated, and more money goes towards things like education, and an educated people leads to a better workforce, which leads to more jobs, which leads to more spending, and it just keeps going round and round, and everything gets better and better and better. But when there's a cycle that goes the other way, and it's when companies start to lower wages to increase their profits, which they started to do in the 70s, lower incomes mean less spending, means job cuts, means more people unemployed, which means less income taxes, which means more cuts to programs and projects, and that vicious cycle just continues backwards. And so we see this actually now. I think it was in Equality for All where he says that everyone talks about the millionaires and billionaires being the job creators. They are not the job creators. You, the consumer, is the job creator. And we see that right now with the pandemic. What are the things that are doing better business? Places like Amazon, services like Instacart, things like that. And places that rely on consumers like restaurants, bars, like Kids Play Zone or whatever. Those places, Disneyland, those places don't have their consumers, so they're cutting jobs. And so whenever somebody tells you that the millionaires and billionaires are the job creators, that's bull. So yeah, I definitely recommend Inequality for All. A little more on just how much money we spend on big business. When the Glass-Steagall Act was repealed, banks could now gamble with your deposit money. Whereas before, any money that you had in the bank could not use to invest in anything high risk like the stock market. Well, with the abolishment of Glass-Steagall, banks could do that, and so they started gambling with your money. And when the bubble started to burst is when we saw too big to fail. Big banks that we couldn't let go under because it would affect our economy, the entire U.S. economy in a negative way. And so we had to bail these big corporations out. AIG received $85 billion in bailouts. $314 billion between Bear Stearns, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and AIG. $314 billion. Do you know how much it would cost to bail out all student loans right now? It's not $314 billion.
It wouldn't cost that much to give us basic health care for all.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wouldn't cost that much to give us a universal basic income to get people through a couple of months of a shutdown so that we could actually get this pandemic under control.
Again, we're the only westernized wealthy country that didn't do that.
What I did think was really interesting, and I mean, there are a couple of places that I saw it in the documentary. So he talks about how the overall trust of the American people that their government is going to do the right thing went from 77% in 1967 to 20% today. So 20% of Americans trust that their government's going to do the right thing. That crosses all political spectrums.
And I think 20% is a little high.
Right? Especially after the last 4 years.
Jon Stewart actually used to joke that chlamydia had a higher rating, like a higher approval rating than Congress did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another place where I really saw it was when he put side by side people who were demonstrating for Occupy Wall Street and people who were demonstrating for the Tea Party, and they were basically saying the same thing.
I think that was for lack of a better term, whitewashed a little bit, because there were some signs at the Tea Party that were not talking about economics.
But what he was really trying to point out was that at the end of the day, we're all little people who just want to be heard and want some agency. Now, does that mean I'm going to vote for somebody who's a member of the Tea Party? No. You know, does that mean I support the Tea Party? No. But do I think at the end of the day that all of us have the same goals? We want to be warm. We want a roof over our heads. We don't want to be part of that 12% that said that they haven't had enough food on their table in the last week.
We all want security.
Right.
I mean...
But, you know, here we go to the bigger point of the movie, which is how do we get to the place where we all agree on how we get there and where we all agree that we're going to fight the Kelly Loefflers of the world and not fight each other?
If I had an answer to that, I would give it, because I don't understand, seeing the things that I see, I don't understand how somebody else thinks that taxing millionaires and billionaires is a bad thing. You know, during our best economic times, taxes for millionaires, we didn't have billionaires at the time, taxes for millionaires was 91%. And that's not to say all of their money was taxed at 91%. Anything over $1 million earned in income was $1 million, was taxed at 91%. That's the thing, is people don't understand how tax rates work. When they talk about taxing everyone who earns over $400,000, the people who usually bite back at that will never earn $400,000 in a year in their entire lives.
Exactly.
And they don't understand that not all $400,000 of that is taxed at that higher rate. $400,000 and $1, that $1 starts to be taxed at that higher rate. You pay that same rate that you did from $300,000 to $400,000, whatever the tax bracket is. And so I don't understand how people don't understand.
You know, I've said it before. It goes back to everybody has that belief that they're like one great deal away from being the next millionaire. And it's ridiculous. It's not true, but people won't let go of that.
Yeah. You're more apt to be one paycheck away from homelessness than you are being that close to being a millionaire.
Exactly.
And it's really unfair of me to keep talking about Inequality for All, because I watched it too. There were two they weren't similar at all, but I think that if they actually sat down and talked together, they would have more in common than not in common. And in Saving Capitalism, it was Guadalupe who had worked for 4 years for McDonald's and was earning $12.55 an hour after 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people would say,
and
who is
still having to go and do like payday loans between paychecks, which is totally predatory.
Yes. And a lot of people would say, well, then why is she still working at McDonald's after 4 years? That's supposed to be a teenager's job. But you know what? When that's the only job that you're qualified for that's in your area, you have no upward mobility beyond that. You're gonna keep working for $12.55 an hour at McDonald's for 4 years. Like, what else are you going to do? In Inequality for All, they had mentioned that children in America who are born into poverty, 42% of them stay in poverty. As opposed to in Denmark, only 25% of children who are born into poverty are remain in poverty. In the UK, it was 30%, and they have an aristocracy. And so we have less upward mobility in the richest country in the world than any place else. And the character that I think should sit down with Guadalupe from Inequality for All, I don't remember her name, but it was a woman that was at a meeting. Her company, her whatever, I think it was a power plant, was brought in a specialist to basically try and convince people that they didn't need a union. And Robert Reich was there to help convince people that they should hold on to their union. And there were a surprising amount of people who were in a union who were against the union. And the union takes union dues out, and it, makes it so hard for large companies to turn a profit and all this other stuff. And one of the guys said, all these got millionaires and billionaires who, went to college and got good educations and everything. Why should I stand in their way? He's like, I could have gone to college if I had been as smart as them. I'm not. So that's why I work, in the job that I do. And I thought, wow, that is really telling that, somebody's like, well, I deserve the worst because I'm not as smart as everyone else. No, dude, you're not a venture capitalist. You're a laborer, but you matter,
And that's not even accurate. I know a lot of people who are highly educated who are having a hard time making ends meet.
Yeah.
It's not even accurate.
Yeah. So one of the women at the meeting, she was like, I think she was the wife of one of the men at the meeting who worked for the power plant. And she said, I had to take a $12 an hour pay cut. $12 an hour pay cut. That's almost what Guadalupe earns an hour. She had to take a pay cut of $12 an hour, and she's seeing her benefits being whittled away. And so she was also, she talked to the camera, and I think she was there to support her husband's support of the union, in that if you don't have a union, they can just come in and do what they want, And she's like, the place that I work for makes billions of dollars. Why do they need my $12 an hour?
Mm-hmm.
Why do they need that little bit more from me? And, that just, it's just like Guadalupe, who was like, I see how much money comes in, and that's just on my shift. And, they make billions and billions of dollars a year, and they give their CEOs, all kinds of bonuses and stocks and things like that are not taxed as income, by the way. And here she is stuck making $12.55 an hour after 4 years. I mean, there's businesses out there like Costco Costco's average starting wage is $11.50 an hour. Their average employee actually earns $21 an hour. So, like, and they're a huge business. They're not struggling at all. You know, like, it can be done. You can pay people a living wage. One of the greatest things that, you know, more people than Robert Reich has said it, but he definitely has said it, is that if you are working 40 hours a week, you should not be struggling to survive.
Mm-hmm. So I looked at the clips from his time in Washington with the Clinton administration, and I thought, is this proof that Washington, D.C. is where idealism goes to die? You know, and I also thought it was really interesting. He talked in the 90s about the average person being full of anger and disillusionment that could be easily manipulated. And I felt like he foretold the rise of Donald Trump back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
It was really interesting.
Again, I just have to say, go back and watch Inequality for All, because it was made in 2013. And when he talked about money in politics back then, and basically, you know, you could buy your way into office. I think we've seen more than just Donald Trump do that, or you could buy a politician in office. And if you actually go and watch even his TikToks leading up to the presidential election, like, I think he started his TikTok account in late July. And I mean, I laugh about not having a crystal ball. I honestly think this guy has a crystal ball, because like some of the stuff that he said would happen happened. So he's obviously got his finger on the pulse.
You know, brilliant guy.
Yeah. Yep. But he's only one guy. And, you know, at the end of the show, he said, it's up to us to change the rules.
Again, I'm not sure how we're going to get there. I would love to see an update of this from him dealing with where we're at this point in time.
I would probably like to see that, and then a year from right now, because, you know, COVID. It's kind of my answer for everything is, you know, COVID. Things are especially wonky right now. I mean,
that's why I would like to see an update now, because I feel like we are in a really, really dark place. I feel like things are not going to be better for several months. I do think that we are at the precipice of things getting better, but I think it's going to be a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so I encourage everyone to go subscribe to him on YouTube, and I think he does probably a lot of Facebook Lives that might make some clips on YouTube, but definitely I think he does a lot on Facebook Live. And just get educated about the economy. This was, you know, I kind of feel like I read a lot of this stuff anyway, but this was still very eye-opening. And this was made in 2017, you know, 3 years ago. A lot has happened in 3 years.
I am going to put a plug in for his new book, which I am going to get, which is kind of a shame since I haven't read the last book that I bought by him, but it's called The System: Who Rigged It, How We Fix It. So maybe there is an answer to how we all come together and push back.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a couple credits on audiobook. I wonder if his books are on audiobook, because the one he wrote right before it. He wrote right before it.
Yes, as a matter of fact, it is.
I'm sure, because it's on Amazon, and he is, after all, who he is. Yeah, so I mean, I have notes for days. I could go on and on, but absolutely go at least watched Inequality for All. Saving Capitalism was definitely a good update. But like I said, I love his TikTok, so I really need to go. I really need to go watch the longer clips of it on YouTube.
Well, and like I said, I understand that he does a weekly show on his YouTube channel called The Common Good. So I'm looking. Yep.
Yeah, he's got some clips also on his webpage, robertreich.org. I made the mistake of putting honey in my tea tonight, and the honey has honeycomb with it. And yeah, my mouth is all waxy, so I can't enunciate well.
Oh, too funny.
I won't be doing that again before podcasting. So that's really all that I have to harp on.
Yeah, I wish I was more articulate, and maybe if we talk about economics again in the future, I can be more articulate. I feel like I have a lot to learn.
Yeah, and there was so much in this, because it wasn't just about economics. It was about, policy and dark money and campaigns, and there are so many directions you can go in when you talk about this stuff that, yeah, follow whatever path entices you.
I'm just putting a link up to his personal page, robertreich.org. And I will get the podcast posted soon.
Alrighty. I don't think we know what we're doing next, so it'll be a surprise. We should probably try and at least post it on the Facebook page so that people have a chance to watch before they listen.
I think that's probably a good idea.
And since I was the one who suggested this, I think you should come up with a next one.
Oh, it's on me.
It's
okay.
on you.
All right.
So if you don't like the next one, it's Diane's fault. If you don't like this one, it's my fault.
All right. I'll figure out something between today and a week from today. So.
Alrighty. Well, until then, you girls watch out for those weirdos.
We are the weirdos, mister.
We are. Have a good week, everybody.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.